Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note the absence of a quorum.
Mr. Clerk, the gentleman from Jackson has noted an absence of a quorum. Would you please open the board and ring the bell? Has everybody noted their presence? Has everybody noted their presence? Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have today on my right and your left, between the fourth and fifth columns in the upper gallery, the Lone Jack FFA and their sponsor, Dusty Davidson. I'd like the House to welcome the Lone Jack FFA. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please close the board and tally the vote. By your vote of 60 yea and 33 present, you have established a quorum. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business is introduction of special guests. I ask you to recognize the lady from St. Louis County, District 67.
Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize a trailblazer within my community. Her name is Hannah Wallace. She was a recent recipient of a $1,000 scholarship from the Zeta Phi Beta, but most importantly, she is a recipient of the scholarship for the Youth of the Year for the Boys and Girls Club. Would the body please stand with me and welcome her today? Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of a special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To your right and to my left are two esteemed colleagues, not my constituents, but from the greater Kansas City area. I'm pleased to introduce both attorneys, Christine Schilt and Melinda Clark San. Please make them feel welcomed.
Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be first reading of House bills and joint resolutions.
Mr. Clerk, would you please read the House bills and House joint resolutions?
House Bill number 1210, introduced by O'Donnell, an act relating to tax credits. House Bill number 1211, introduced by Ely, an act relating to calculations for state aid to public schools. And House Bill number 1212, introduced by Ely, an act relating to election offenses with penalty provisions.
Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be House Bills for Perfection. I ask you to recognize the lady from Dunklin for a motion on House Committee substitute for House Bill 994.
Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 994 be perfected and printed.
The lady from Dunklin has moved for the perfection of printing for House Bill 994, 552, and 984. Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Committee substitute for House Bill 994 be adopted.
The lady from Dunklin has moved for the adoption of House Committee substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984. Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the title for House Committee substitute for House Bill 994 be agreed to.
The lady from Dunklin has moved for the adoption of the title for House Committee substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984. Are there any discussions on the title? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the title will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted the title. Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a brief explanation of this bill. So this bill is basically relating to judicial proceedings. This bill was voted due pass out of the Judiciary Committee by a 13-0 vote. Basically, there are 19 statutes and 10 subject matters that this bill deals with. And to briefly go through them, the first thing that it talks about is age of adult pursuant to Section 455, which actually corrects the age of an adult and a minor. Secondly, the bill deals with guardian and conservatorships, which eliminates the home study requirement for grandparents unless it's specifically requested pursuant to 475. Thirdly, pursuant to 476, this extends the court automation fund that's due to expire in 2023 and extends it to 2029. This is your CaseNet, your e-file, your Show Me Courts fund that it operates. Fourthly, this bill corrects the court reporter's salaries pursuant to 485. This sets the compensation for court reporters commensurate to their experience. This fixes a provision in the law that was messed up and was incorrect. Fifthly, this bill established juror compensation. Any county may vote to not pay jurors for 2 days and then later vote to pay them. Each county can opt to pay the jurors pursuant to statute. Sixthly, this bill addresses disclosure of personal information in court records. It limits that disclosure of your personal Social Security number, dates of birth, bank account numbers. Nextly, it creates a uniform interstate deposition discovery act. It's how we deal with subpoenas that come from a foreign jurisdiction or out of state. Eighthly, bail consideration. The bill establishes factors courts must consider when setting bail. If you're a flight risk, if the defendant poses a danger, if there is a criminal history, or if you fail to appear previously. Next, the bill addresses tampering with a judicial officer. This is already in statute, but the bill creates an offense if you disseminate a judge's personal information or his family's personal information. And lastly, this establishes a public defender fund pursuant to Statute 600. Monies given to the public defenders can't go directly to them, and so with this fund it'll establish that the public defender, the director of the public defender program, can request this be dispersed if there are any bequests, grants, or donations. And Mr. Speaker, I have nothing further to address. I'll entertain any questions.
Further discussion on the bill. Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment ending in 07H. It has been distributed, and I move for its adoption.
The lady from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1. Lady from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is a technical fix that should have been done years ago. The Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act, the UCCJEA, is a uniform act drafted by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws in 1997. The UCCJEA has since been adopted by 49 U.S. states, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Island. The act became effective in Vermont in 2011. As of today, the only state that has not adopted the UCCJEA is Massachusetts. Missouri was one of the last states to enact the UCCJEA when we enacted it 14 years ago in HB 481 in 2009. HB 481 repealed the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act, sections 452, 440 to 452, 550, and put the UCCJEA, sections 452, 700 to 452, 930 into statute. This amendment is a technical correction to remove the remaining reference to the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Act from our statutes. And with that, I will take any questions.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Seeing gentleman from Howell.
Brief comments on the amendment. Mr.
Please
Speaker.
proceed.
This bill was vetted through judiciary, and like every bill, ended up being a bipartisan bill. We've had a chance to also look at this amendment, and we have no objection.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Seeing none, lady from Dunklin.
Mr. Speaker, to further speak on the amendment.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I've looked over the amendment as well as the gentleman from Howell, and I'm in favor of the amendment.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Seeing none, lady from St. Louis County, you recognize to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I close.
The lady from St. Louis County has renewed her motion for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Committee Substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Amendment 1. Further discussion. Gentleman from St. Louis.
To speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, we heard this bill in judiciary. As the lady stated, it was voted 13-0. There are a substantial amount of good things in this bill, and I urge the body to vote yes.
Further discussion. Gentleman from St. Louis. I'm sorry, Jackson.
Jackson. Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, yes, this bill did come through judiciary. There is a combination of approximately 10 bills, I believe, all of which have good intent, passed out unanimously. Addresses a lot of different areas in the law that I think is important. It's a good bill. I would ask that the body support it. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill. Lady from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to offer an amendment ending in 01H and move for its adoption. It has been distributed.
The lady from Jefferson has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 2. Lady from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment expands the list of circuits which may take a surcharge and reimburse the state, because they reimburse the state for the salaries of family court commissioners. So they can charge a fee not to exceed $15. I'm happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll renew my motion.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Seeing none. Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have reviewed that amendment as well, and I'm in favor of that amendment.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Seeing none. Lady from Jefferson, you're recognized to close.
Thank you. I renew my motion.
The lady from Jefferson has renewed her motion for the adoption of House Amendment 2. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Amendment 2. Further discussion on House Committee Substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984. Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To briefly speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pretty sure the body has noticed that there is a large amendment that I have dropped, which is .04H. I am not going to introduce that bill. However, I think it is important that we have the conversation about money bill reform, and that is what this bill attempts to do, to set a monetary bail that shall not be accepted unless a judge or a magistrate finds that no portion of the consideration, plea, security deposit, or in defamation paid, given, made, or promised for the execution has felonious obtained. This simply just says that we do not want anyone who has a felony to get out on cash bail. This tries to make it so that it's a non-violent misdemeanor of trying to make sure that we're not packing our jails with people who have speeding tickets or who fail to appear because of a speeding ticket. So we're just not trying to overpack our courts because they can't afford to pay for it. I just hope that, we have this conversation. I simply just wanted to have the conversation refraining to this. I would, Mr. Speaker, if I could, like to inquire of the gentleman from the Copeland District.
Does the gentleman from Dent yield?
I yield.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, I know that you had something to do with the bail language in this bill, and I kind of wanted us to have a small or simple conversation about bail reform and what was your ideas with the bail language that's in this bill.
I think what my initial issue was that there was a court ruling by the Supreme Court that had some judges throughout the state that were setting bail on financial stability instead of the ultimate safety of the community.
Right.
So that's kind of where it started. And I know we have had discussion just in the last few days about bail reform.
Yeah.
And, talking about your misdemeanor charges that people's paying for bail, I understand that might be an issue. I was unaware of that because in my area that normally doesn't happen. So I can see where that needs to be talked about. But I think my bill that I have that we've worked together with the committee and other people, that it kind of addresses misdemeanor charges, but I can see maybe in the future where we might be able to tweak it a little bit to make it more specific. But we don't want to mandate the judges because that would be unconstitutional. They still have to give them the ability to make that decision.
Exactly, and I appreciate you saying that. I look forward to us working this out and trying to figure out a way to make this a thing in Missouri because we don't want people to just be sitting in jail for misdemeanors, non-violent misdemeanors, to be very clear. We're not talking about people who have been arrested for assault or anything like that. We're talking about simple traffic violations, things that would just take points off of their license.
And I think there's some legislation from other reps that may turn some of the criminal violations we're talking about misdemeanors into civil issues in the future. So them things are being addressed, but maybe a different way than bail, that there would not be bail on those misdemeanor charges that may be being addressed in your district.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Gentleman from Clay.
From Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to speak briefly on the bill.
Please proceed.
I had an amendment prepared to offer this afternoon. It was to, in the spirit of increasing compensation for jurors, it was also going to lower the age that someone could opt out and be excused from jury service from 75, which is the current law, down to 70. This has been a request from people in my district. Also a way to help seniors, going on a long day of jury service is hard, especially for people on limited incomes. So this is just one small way to help seniors. However, I understand that must not be a request just from people in my district. I understand that the gentleman from Scott, Berger District, is offering this bill, and there's a public hearing on it this afternoon, and so I'm going to defer to him. But I also wanted to express my support for the lady of Dunklin's bill that we're hearing now. Thanks so much.
Further discussion on the underlying bill. Seeing none, lady from Dunklin, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The lady from Dunklin has renewed her motion for the adoption of House Committee Substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984 as amended. All those in favor of adopting the House Committee substitute will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Committee substitute to House Bills 994, 52, 984 as amended. Lady from Dunklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
The lady from Dunklin has renewed her motion for the perfection and printing of House Committee substitute to House Bills 994, 52, 984 as amended. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've perfected and printed House Committee substitute to House Bills 994, 52, and 984 as amended. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be announcements.
Announcements. Seeing none, gentleman from Pulaski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Emerging Issues will meet in Hearing 6 at 4 p.m. today.
Gentleman from St. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Announcement.
Please proceed.
Well, as you know, it's Wednesday, and therefore we are wearing bow ties. So if you would like to be a part of the official photo, we'll be meeting at the dais upon adjournment.
Lady from Iron.
Announcement.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I received a text message from the gentleman from Stoddard, and he wanted everyone to know that he was going to be going home this morning, and he appreciated everyone's thoughts, prayers, and text messages.
Thank you, lady. Glad the gentleman is home. Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Speaker, announcement. Your
Please
Committee
proceed.
on Ways and Means will meet in the morning at 8 o'clock in Hearing Room 5.
Further announcements. Lady from Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An announcement.
Please proceed.
Your Committee on Higher Education will meet at 4 o'clock in Hearing Room 5.
Further announcements. Gentleman from Urban Coal.
Announcement, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Your Corrections and Public Institutions will have a hearing at 4 o'clock in House Hearing Room 1.
Gentleman from Howell.
Announcement, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Your Committee on Judiciary, I think it's at 5 o'clock today. I have no idea where, so look it up.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further announcements. Seeing none. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Upon return, members should be prepared to consider all bills for third reading. And with no other business before the body, I ask that the House stand adjourned until 9 a.m. Thursday, February 23rd, 2023.
The gentleman from Jackson has moved that the House stand adjourned until 9 a.m. Thursday, February the 23rd, 2023. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. The House is adjourned.